Hello and welcome to the In the Money Players podcast. This is our show for Tuesday, February 7th. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornital, back with you in the Brooklyn bunker once again, and very happy to be joined, as I have been so much lately, on these recap shows by a man whose work you know from InTheMoneyPodcast.com, from behind the mic at Sam Houston, all over these airwaves, really. Coming to us from the planet Texas, he is Nick Tammaro. Nick, what's going on?
Doing great, my friend. Glad to have another week in the books on the Derby Trail, and now we're really building up steam.
Yeah, the things are getting pretty interesting in the next few weekends, and I want to definitely start the show with an update on where we are. But I did want to point out first that our friend and colleague Jonathan Kitchen. Now, granted, I believe there was a scratch that left him with all but one horse in the Sunday coast to coast pick 5 bet. But for approximately the 87th time in his horse playing career, he would have had that pick 5 if he hadn't done the old all but one runner situation.
Oh no! Oof. Was that a Santa Anita leg or a?
Yeah, it was a Santa Anita leg. It was, and it was tricky, but it makes me laugh every time. But he won't be persuaded that the all but one isn't the winning strategy.
Yeah, that one's tough.
Let's start with the big figure 3-year-old winner from out on the West Coast, Newgate, getting the job done and looking pretty good in the process. 100 buyer speed figure under Frankie Dettori. And, you know, the cynic in me sees beats hard to figure by a neck and says, is this really right? But I mean, the clock is the clock. And I think, you know, from the little poking around I did, this looked like a legitimate 3-digit buyer speed figure, something that's been in short order among this class so far. You know, it was just a 4-horse team scrimmage. But what did you think of Newgate overall?
You know, I think it was a solid performance. You know, you have to wonder about what exactly was going on with some of the pre-race machinations as far as all 4 horses being from the same barn. It felt like everybody was ridden kind of to plan, and the disappointment in there was Arabian Lion, whose debut race now exists in La La Land because he's just not duplicated it at all, and his good second at Keeneland is not looking so good anymore. So that, you know, really gave way to Newgate running well. He was coming off a good effort in the Sham, a horse that Bob Baffert seems to be willing to run pretty frequently, and he's kind of running him back, racing him into some type of form. So, you know, he looked solid. It held up well on the clock. It didn't look as if it was subject to any type of track bias, as last year's Messier win in this race was. So, yeah, I think you want to take it as a pretty legitimate race. And, you know, hopefully we see some resolution to whether Baffert's horses are going to be able to run in his name or whether they'll have to be transferred. That way we can talk about these races with a little bit more confidence as far as what exactly is going to happen. But, you know, I think regardless of the name in the trainer column on a horse like this, he's a horse that deserves a lot of attention as far as the Derby Trail goes.
Is that some more legal wranglings that are going on? I mean, if things go to the letter of the law as stated, they would have to switch like last year, but there's something going on. I haven't been following the story well enough. Do you have any update on what they're trying to get accomplished to see if they can run in Baffert's name?
The last I saw, there was a hearing for an injunction that would allow them to stay in Baffert's name. Right now, as it's set out by a CDI, they have to be transferred to a different trainer by February 28th.
Oh, so, interesting. So it's not just for the last prep.
Not just for the last prep. So that would be, you know, Newgate, you would imagine, is probably on a one more prep and that's it type of situation, looking at the Santa Anita Derby. But, you know, the runner-up, you could see running twice more. Arabian Night at this point feels like he's probably going to run twice more, maybe just once more. But, yeah, either way, these horses are going to have to be transferred as it stands right now. But obviously with an injunction that could change. So I guess we'll find out, you know, the next few weeks. But of course, we're going to be dealing with another future wager this weekend where all of the Baffert runners at this point are excluded.
Right. And they'll be in that. They'll have their category. You'll have to take them all in one, like we talked about the last time. A general handicapping question for you before we get to where you think Newgate compares to Arabian Night and Forte at this stage. But the general question is, you know, as a time man, as am I, when you see that 100 figure, but it's earned under, I don't want to say dubious, that's too strong, but it's earned under these unusual circumstances of 4 runners and you know, beating a horse that had never run anywhere near that fast, like hard to figure by only a neck. How literally do you take that 100 the next time when Newgate shows up?
Good question. I mean, I think it's one that you kind of want to be careful with. You kind of want to see him duplicate it. It looks though as if there was a trend, he's going the right direction.
That's for
And he
sure.
did run a faster race in his 3-year-old debut, so he's going the right way. He is an atypical Baffert horse in that he was kind of just an average 2-year-old, and he's getting better now as a 3-year-old. So we generally don't see those types all that often. Usually, they show themselves pretty quickly from that barn. So I think you want to believe that it's good, and you want to see him do it next time out. The thing is, there's just really nothing. When Taba won the Santa Anita Derby last year and got a fast figure in just his second start, there was something sexy about Taba, right? I mean, we knew he had a ton of upside because he had only run twice. And here he took this giant step forward. We've kind of seen Newgate. His form is pretty, I guess you could say, exposed. But, he's a horse that we've seen run on a regular basis. We know he's good, not great. He's probably one that can take a little bit of a step forward. And I think it's fair to kind of demand that he does.
Would you rate him in behind Arabian Night and Forte then confidently at this stage?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely behind those two. He's just done nothing at this point to really indicate that he deserves more billing than those two. I understand Forte needs to run as a 3-year-old to really get a sense of where he is. I guess maybe we're looking at that happening in the Fountain of Youth. And the sooner it happens, the better. So, yeah, I mean, he's not quite at Arabian Nights level, in my opinion. I understand he ran a faster figure than Arabian Night did, but give me Arabian Nights 97 in just his second career start over. It's kind of a similar situation to what I'm saying about Taba over Newgate's 100 now in having had multiple starts.
One other horse that's on the top of a lot of lists is Cave Rock. Do we know if he's back on the work tab yet? Even what are we running out of time for him, or has this been the plan from the Baffert camp?
I mean, I don't think that not having a logged workout
Yeah,
by,
could possibly
almost
be.
February is according to plan. So, I mean, I'm no trainer, but and I think I just saw this morning somebody say, has Cave Rock actually logged a workout? And I don't believe he has. So I think what's going on behind the scenes is that something is clearly not right with Cave Rock. I think that seems somewhat certain at this point. And I'm just looking up to verify that. But yeah, that's a little disconcerting. And tack on the fact that we all kind of thought coming out of last year he might have some distance limitations anyway. Now you're officially supposed to be concerned.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. And it's interesting. It
No
feels like we
work
have no
for
workout.
Cave.
We have it, and Baffert. I mean, I guess he feels embattled. It doesn't feel like we're getting the same amount of information out of the barn that we usually get. It feels like he's cagier than usual under the circumstances. One other thing I just want to underline, we talked about it already a little bit with Newgate, but the storyline of the Tory having a Derby match. Now, surely, well, maybe not surely, very likely, even if he doesn't have a horse he's been riding, you'd think he'd be able to pick something up for a race like the Kentucky Derby if he's committed to riding here for it. But I like the storyline of him having a horse that he's been with throughout this process. And just as a racing fan, I feel like it'd be very cool to have him back in the Derby with a horse that he's that he's ridden before and that he's connected to.
Yeah, I mean, internationally, nobody has as much fame as Frankie here and abroad. And so I mean, it always felt to me, I don't know if you felt similarly, but the whole purpose of this exercise was to get a Derby mount. I mean, it
Yeah.
seemed like that was the whole reason he was doing it. That was the whole reason why he found Ron Anderson and or used Ron Anderson. And so, yeah, no surprise there. I'm glad that he's done it. He's riding very well, all things considered. I mean, he's certainly not riding like somebody that should be retiring soon, but he is certainly getting on in years. He is 50. Do you know 50, early 50s?
I was going to say
I
52.
I do know when his birthday is because it is December 15th, just like mine. I just don't know what year. And he's definitely
That's
a few
cool.
years before me.
That's a cool
Yeah.
birthday buddy. Yeah, he's a little older than me, but not much. And I just
Yeah.
hit 50. So I'm gonna guess 52 for
And
Frankie.
he's been so good, I mean, talk about being at the top of the heap internationally for all those years. So yeah, I mean, at the very least, you see what some of these international guys, and you and I could go down a rabbit hole on this, but what some of these international guys have said over the years about the Derby. And I mean, Ryan Moore's ridden in basically every big race in the world, and he said nothing comes close to riding in the Derby.
It's going to be interesting to see. Sometimes, a lot of jockeys with that word retire, I feel like they're not exactly clear on what it means, given how many comebacks we have. But Frankie does sound pretty serious about this one. I sure wouldn't mind having him around for a little bit longer, but we'll enjoy it while it lasts. And this will be a great chapter in the story, hopefully, if we can get him on a live Kentucky Derby mount. That's going to involve Newgate showing that effort last Saturday was for real and even improving on it, not out of the question. Let's move over to the East Coast and South Florida specifically and talk about Rocket Can winning the Holy Bull for the white hot Bill Mott. I would describe this as a good news, bad news situation, Nick, with the good news being the horse got the job done and the impressive win visually, I suppose, at the graded stakes level. Not super impressive, but, a winning effort is a winning effort in a graded stake. But the clock, neither the eye nor the clock love this race. Comes back just an 82 Beyer speed figure, the kind of thing you wouldn't be surprised to see a 2-year-old at Saratoga get when we're talking about February of the 3-year-old year. Again, as a figure-oriented player, very tempted to take the skeptical view of this one. Am I underselling Rocket Can?
No, I think up there in Horse 7, they woke up Holy Bull and he said, let me look at the field. He saw it and said, nah, I'm going to rest. But it was not. It was more like a holy calf. But it was not very impressive on paper. I mean, the funny thing about it is really it didn't look like a good race on paper, and it played out exactly that way. Now, people will hear me say that and say, well, you were the guy who mentioned Rocket Can a few weeks ago as one that you would maybe place a future wager on. The only thing that you're saying for Rocket Can at this point is that he took the worst of it the whole way around there and stayed on. And he might be a horse who really is helped by distance. So, I mean, we have seen a very clear move forward in this horse once he got more ground. And, could there still be some upside? Yeah, I think there could still be some upside. I mean, I basically look at this as his third career start because he just became a new animal going 2 turns. The problem is that this was supposed to be where his figures pushed towards the 90s. And it just didn't. It wasn't very fast. Now, the only caveat to me is that these days, these types of days at Gulfstream are virtually impossible to make figures. This was the only 2-turn race. It was the 12th race on a day where I think there were a grand total of 4 dirt races. Every one of them was around 1 turn otherwise. It's very hard to make figures on these days. The other thing that you have to deal with here is, I mean, do you really think Shadow Dragon improved by, 20-something points? I know that he was bolstered by simply breathing the same air as Looms Boldly in his debut, but, it's hard to believe that horse took such an immense step forward. Now, at the same time, I mean, you want to break the race down as much as you possibly can. And like I originally said, I mean, the other pace horses were nowhere to be seen. So, that is something that you do have to at least keep in mind. One thing I like about Rocket Can is that he's a Mott horse, and now he's going to dance every dance, right? He's going to run twice more. We're going to know exactly what Rocket Can is in the next 6 to 8 weeks, and that's good because we'll benefit from it. And yeah, we'll see exactly how it shakes out. But at this point, I mean, you absolutely would have wanted a little more out of this.
I was tickled by Shadow Dragon, the horse that won in that pace collapse in the Looms Boldly debut, running second at a gigantic number. But yeah, I mean, we're talking about New York bred maiden versus graded stakes fields for 3-year-olds in February. It does make it feel like it wasn't the fastest race in the world. But I'll take the form boost anyway. I'll take the form boost for Looms Boldly. We should talk about the no-show of the race, Cyclone Mischief. I'm usually the last guy. I feel like bounced is the most overused and lazy excuse, but something happened that was out of bounds. And, I feel like you're either going to go bled or you're going to go bounce. Because that race previously, that allowance race, January 8th, was a very good race. It was good on the clock. It was good on the eye. And here he went away so tamely. Something went wrong. Would you put yourself in either of those camps, bounced or bled, or do you think we were just wrong about this horse heading in? What's your thought?
I'd lean towards the Lasix situation. When one horse has kind of one breakthrough performance in a 4-race stretch, and it happens to be the only one where they use Lasix, it looks to me like that's probably the explanation. And now this is his second graded stake try without Lasix, where he performed poorly. I don't want to pin too much of it on him. I did not like Tyler's ride. When you break like that horse did, you do not grab that horse's head and start to take them back. So even if Dale told you, I want him to raid, I want him to be off the pace, I mean, that's one of those situations where I think when you hop off, you're better off apologizing to him and saying, hey, I thought I gave him the best chance to win, because he popped right out of the gate. And then it was clearly by intention that they were going to take him back. And what he ended up doing was eating a ton of dirt, and he was stuck kind of wedged in between horses. The problem, as you alluded to, is that, when the real running started, his tank was empty.
Nothing.
So you worry a little bit. I mean, maybe he came back a little too quickly. He came back in 4 weeks, 27 days. It shouldn't be that big a deal. You're talking about still a relatively lightly raced 3-year-old. So his cup of coffee on the Derby trail is probably just that. But, a lot of people will give him one more shot. I'd look for him in a situation down the line where he can get Lasix again.
These are interesting points. I mean, it was a bad trip. He was just never in any good position. And I think you're probably right about the tactical error, but just I wasn't going to give that excuse in a slow race where so little was shown. It wouldn't shock me if Dale Romans persisted. I mean, if he believes this was just a one-off, but I do think the Lasix concern probably keeps me from wanting to be forgiving unless the price is just huge. So
it would shock me if Dale doesn't persist.
Right. Let's talk about the most impressive 3-year-old on the card. 3-year-old colt, but probably 3-year-old in all on the card, coming out of that allowance race a little bit earlier on. Halfway through, that race, I wasn't sure what Tapit Trice. I want to call him Tapit Trice too, but I'm pretty sure it's Tapit Trice. It looked to me like his stablemate Shesterkin was the one who was holding the cards as they turned in, but that was a heck of a stretch run from Tapit Trice, and ends up scoring with a 92 Beyer speed figure that if anything to me feels maybe like it's a little hair low even. I was very impressed with this performance, and this is certainly one who's going to press on. Would he have won the Holy Bull?
In a canter. I mean, I think he would have won for fun. I'll tell you, the thing about him is that, he kind of has that Todd Pletcher profile of a long striding, grinding type of horse that clearly Luis Saez was on a mission to get him outside. And once he did, and he was comfortable, he covers a ton of ground, and he had a lot more tactical speed on Saturday than he had in either of those 2 starts in New York. So I thought it was very, very interesting that Todd ran Shesterkin and Tapit T in this in a non, not in the Holy Bull. I kind of figured one. I get it with Shesterkin. I mean, maybe he looks like he might be a little bit more distance challenged, but I mean, I would have figured if he was bringing Tapit T out of New York, he'd run him. He'd run him in the Holy Bull, right? It just was the only thing that made sense. I mean, maybe he wanted to see one more race to see exactly what's under the hood. Todd also now has to sort out where he's going to run this horse and where he's going to run Forte. I mean, the other thing that maybe it gives way to is that Todd didn't want to run in the Holy Bull and then back up for the Gotham and then stretch back out for the Wood or something like that. Maybe this horse now becomes a Louisiana Derby horse. I wonder if they'll give him one shot to get to the Derby or two. But, either way, and we talked pretty extensively about him in previewing the Derby Future Wager. He's got a great pedigree. He's got the right trainer. And I'll tell you what, he may not win the Derby, but he is the future book favorite for the Belmont, in my opinion, by a mile. I mean, this looks like Mo Donegal on steroids to me. He's not, Mo Donegal had accomplished more by this point than he had, no question about it. But I love the way this horse moves, and I think he's got a real opportunity to get good going even longer. So, I mean, he came home. I understand it was a soft trip in that the first quarter was slow, and he had a great position on the outside. But I mean, there was a moment in upper stretch where Pete Aiello was kind of setting the stage for it to be a little bit of a showdown. And then you look 5 seconds later and he's like 4 lengths in front. And I mean, I know his stablemate was decelerating a little bit, but I mean, he really finished. I thought it was a really nice effort.
Yeah, he put it to bed rather quickly when it looked like it was going to be a tussle there for a second, for sure. And he also, to me, and this is such a good point you make about the Belmont, he did that long distance horse thing that they do where they come off the bridle kind of early, but they just find so much from that circumstance. It was impressive for sure. And I wonder if and we'll have to, see what Todd Pletcher says about this. But I wonder if running them in the allowance rather than the Holy Bull suggests that he felt like they're going to come forward for this, that they weren't quite at, quite ready for that in his mind for the graded stakes test. And if that's not tipping the hand that there might be more under the hood for both of these runners, we'll read the tea leaves going forward and see. But very, very impressive effort. While we're talking about 3-year-olds, let's talk about the Forward Gal, 3-year-old filly, Red Carpet Ready. We've talked a lot about Oscar performance on these airwaves for our friends at Mill Ridge. And I thought this was a very nice effort and very interesting because it feels like a lot of the Oscar success to this point has come on turf. Interesting to see him have such a good dirt runner in this division.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, and hats off to the ownership as well as Susan Moulton, owner of And the Winner Is. They're using these Oscar performance names very well. So I'm a big fan of the name Red Carpet Ready. But all kidding aside, she has now been really good in all 3 starts. And the filly that she beat in that stake race at Churchill Key of Life is good, and she had looked very good prior to this. The other thing about this Forward Gal performance is that I think she took everybody's best shot. I don't think anybody that was supposed to run well in there was compromised. I mean, it ended up being a very formful race, all things considered, but undervalued asset had been a solid maiden winner at Aqueduct, and she took her best punch around the turn and sort of left her behind, and atomically was in position and just couldn't quite get it done. Probably more of a lesser graded stake type, maybe better going long. So I thought it was excellent. I don't know where she'll top out distance wise, but what we know right now, and there's nothing wrong with it for her ownership or anybody that's a fan, is that she's very good around one turn. So there are a ton of great opportunities for one turn fillies later on in the year, and if it ends up that maybe she doesn't want a little extra ground, then I think they could settle on her being a horse that makes it to the 8 bells and even the elongated Acorn at 1.16 or something like that. I mean, as it stands right now, you have to give her a shot to get to the Oaks, and she deserves it because she's been very, very good, and I was impressed.
Story to follow going forward. A couple other races from the weekend I want to ask you about, and then if you had anything you wanted to throw in there. But the Tampa Bay Stakes, I thought Emmanuel, I'll red board a little bit. I thought it was a pretty darn good price at the 6-1 or so. Ends up getting the job done with a 98 buyer speed figure. And this is a horse who, it felt like another interesting one for Pletcher. Interesting that he had the opportunity, with the wide openness of the dirt division for older horses, decided to keep this one on grass. And to me, in this wide open division domestically, looks like a major player going forward. Beat some decent horses and comes out of it with a enhanced reputation, I think.
Yeah, and I think did it in a way that you're a little compelled to think, maybe he's taken a pretty clear step forward. Hadn't really been too successful rating off the pace. At least it felt like his best races were going to come with him kind of being a little bit more engaged early. So it was a solid effort. I mean, Todd Pletcher's numbers with horses off of layoffs of any type have always been very good. So it's not surprising in the least that he ran as well as he did. I wouldn't have thought halfway down the backstretch that he was a particularly likely winner. It looked like he was maybe trying to keep up. They were going fast. The pace was very strong. So all things considered, he looks like a horse that will end up in some good races now moving forward. This division is it gets a little wonky as far as now until Derby Day, but I mean, you could maybe see him in like the Muniz or something like that at Fairgrounds. I don't know what their turf situation is there. So I would imagine that, he'll be pointed to all of the real grade 2, grade 1, grade 2 races, at middle distances.
Stablemate Charge It made the return to the races. Speaking of Pletcher layoff runners on Sunday, the free square in the start of that coast to coast, cruising in at 1-5 or so and earning I think you told me off air, a 102 buyer. I thought that was pretty good. That would have been higher than I might have guessed looking at it, but that would be pointing him very much in the right direction in this completely wide open older horse division. We got Taba obviously, but he's going to be traveling for a while. Charge It sure looks like he might have some valuable prizes next to his name before too long.
Yeah, Todd came out afterwards and said Met Mile and Whitney are the targets. Can we get Taba and Charge It in the gate for the Met Mile? Boy, would that be, we don't have we hardly have any good horses out there. I mean, well, they might as well run against each other as soon as possible. I see that Taba is likely for the Saudi Cup. I didn't see that it might be a Saudi Dubai double. So, I mean, what that leads me to believe is that they'll probably come back after the Saudi Cup, and then I would imagine that Baffert would look to a race like the Met Mile.
That
I think
timing could work.
the timing could be perfect, right? Because then, from there you're eligible for Del Mar or the Whitney, depending on what they want to do. So yeah, I mean, that would just be incredible. So I mean, I guess they'll probably kind of take it easy with Charge It. I mean, it is early February, so you're talking about races that are in early June and early August. So we're going to have to see him at least once more before a race like the Met Mile. I mean, do they keep him on ice until the Westchester? That seems unlikely, but you've got a lot of possibilities there. I mean, he could go around 2 turns in New Orleans. He could go to Oaklawn. He could run in New York in a race like the Carter. If Todd wants to shorten him up to 7 furlongs, I don't know really if he's going to want to do that. But one thing we know is that we desperately need good horses, and Charge It's a good horse.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have him back. He's the one. We talked about him on these airwaves with Todd Pletcher before he ever ran, and he was super excited about him, and he's delivered on that promise in fits and starts. But this could be his year potentially. So excited to watch him as we move along. I did also want to give a quick word on the Palos Verdes, won by Hopkins, who had run that. He was in that Shaw's maiden that had the giant figure and had shown a little bit here and there. But what I liked about this effort was his ability to truly settle and pounce. Came back a 97 on the Beyer scale, so needs to get considerably faster if you're going to be thinking about a long-term target like the Breeders' Cup Sprint. But, I mean, I wouldn't rule it out, would you?
No, I mean, given the state of the sprint division, I wouldn't rule anything out. I think he's a horse that probably deserves some real consideration. A lot of good sprinters from last year are gone, right? There's no more Jack Christopher. There's no more Jackie's Warrior. Cody's Wish is probably going to be a little more geared towards the longer distance races. So, yeah, I mean, this is a horse that I'm sure Bob Baffert would like to see everything get sorted out with Churchill Downs so that he can run him in the Churchill Downs on Derby Day, with that being kind of an interim target. So I think one thing that he made clear in the Palos Verdes is he wants to stay shorter. He does not want to go 2 turns, and that was made pretty abundantly clear. I didn't expect him to be favored or co-favored with Straight No Chaser, but boy, if you had let me know beforehand that How Be It had no chance, then I probably would have handicapped the race a little differently.
I picked How Be It too. I thought he'd get a great spot, but I just think like something went wrong there. It seemed like he just wasn't moving the way he normally moves, and
they took no money.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Maybe there was maybe there was some hand tipping that there were some vibes around. But yeah, I absolutely whiffed on him as the top pick. I thought Hopkins would be the best of speed, had some savers, but the pick five had already blown up. Anything else you wanted to talk about from last weekend, racing wise, or looking forward? We can go that direction too. We got some big stuff this weekend too.
Yeah, no, excited about this upcoming weekend with the rescheduled Withers and the Sam F. Davis. Always fun to have the good cards at Tampa. I mean, the Suncoast at Tampa is going to come up a really nice race with Wonder Wheel and Julia Shining running against each other. Yeah. So 2 overrated horses squaring off, and we'll see which one reigns supreme. Don't be surprised if I look at door number 3.
Yeah, I was going to say, can we find a big long shot in there with those 2 taking 80% of the market?
That's exactly what we're going to try.
All right, I like it. We'll talk about these races later on. We'll be covering Tampa on the plus side. Maybe we'll get you involved in that conversation, Nick, and we'll bring back Double R Rich Averill, who it was a pleasure to have on. He had some good ideas for Tampa last Saturday, so we'll keep that idea in the hopper, and we'll bring it back later in the week. But super fun catching up with you, and looking forward to doing it again soon. If you're watching on YouTube, we have a whole other segment on the show, but it's not going to be video. So go over to inthemoneypodcast.com or In the Money Media, wherever you get your podcasts, and hear me catch up with Mike Maloney. That's going to be a lot of fun, talking about, some of the challenges that professional horse players and serious horse players everywhere face these days. Really looking forward to that chat, and looking forward, Nick, to having you on later in the week.
Very much so. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Pete.
Cheers, my friend.